If you need to apply the same business logic to multiple document libraries or lists, probably you are building a flow per each of the document libraries that gets triggered when there's a change, new file, or changes in the list or library. Now, with this video, you'll find out how to overcome that obstacle. Let's see how this works live before jumping into the explanation. So let's create a new document library. And what I'm going to do is log this library for the webhook to react to changes that happen here. So for that, I'm going to need these libraries. I can get it from here. These are some objects that you have from the console, from the front end to get the ID. Also the site ID, it's in here if you need to get it for your Graph API action. So let's pick this list GUID and register this webhook over here. So video, and this is the ID, and we need also the site URL, which I'm picking from the URL in here and putting here. Now we also need to set up what's the expiration timestamp for this webhook, because webhooks have an end date, can be renewed of course, we'll see that in a moment, and then we hit save. Now behind the scenes there's going to be a flow that's going to configure this webhook so that we get changes, any changes from this document library that we just created. Okay, so we see here webhook is listening. We'll see the technical implementation in a moment, and we are now listening with this flow to this library, and here is the ID of the webhook in case we need to check it out. Now from here I'm going to close the console. I'm going to upload a file, drag and drop here, and now just by adding this file into this document library, in a moment I will get the changes from here. Boom, and now we got it. We have to register here the last callback, and what we are doing is registering all these new files, new changes that occur here in the document library into this other table called operation logs. And this is the, probably let's add a new column here. This is the file that we have just created from the English video webhook into this document library. Come on. And here we go. So we have just gotten information directly from SharePoint without creating a new flow to get the trigger from this document library. Before jumping into the technical implementation with Power Automate, I want to explain or try to explain how this works theoretically from the documentation. So we jump to this page in the documentation, you'll see a bunch of C# code here. You don't need that. Let's focus on this diagram over here, which is crucial to understand what's going on and what you need to create a webhook and register it to listen to changes into a list or library. What this diagram is explaining us is how to register a webhook. These steps are pretty clear, 3 steps. First, we need to submit a call to SharePoint in here saying, hey, for this list over here, which needs to be identified with this GUID, and that's what I was configuring in the demo before. Tell me, so subscribe to the changes and tell me when there's any change. This is what we are doing with this first call. Now after that, SharePoint is going to respond to our application or Power Automate flow saying, okay, great, whatever this is the URL that we provide in this configuration, I'm sending you this random string, and please respond in less than 5 seconds to verify that the URL that you have provided to submit changes to is working. Now what you have to do is respond saying, hey, okay, I'm listening, and this is the random string that you just provided to me to verify that I'm the one that has subscribed to this webhook. And what SharePoint will tell us is, okay, created, check. Now the webhook is created. This is basically this kind of contract handshake that is happening when you create a webhook against a list or library in SharePoint. Nuances are here. So maximum expiration date. Let's jump here. You see this is the object that you are providing to SharePoint to subscribe to the webhook, and what you need to say is, okay, which resource, this is the call, so the site and the list ID, notification URL, this is basically URL of the flow we are going to be listening to or from, and expiration date time is maximum 6 months away from the time you are subscribing. Also, we'll see we can add a new parameter here, which is called client state, if I'm not mistaken, client state, to store any information, and this could be a string, any hard-coded value that SharePoint is always going to bring to us when SharePoint notifies that there's been a change into a list or library. All right, and important, don't forget that we need to respond to the webhook within 5 seconds or the registration is going to fail. Now let's dive into the technical implementation using Power Automate. And well, we've got this Dataverse, this model-driven app to manage all the webhooks that we've got configured and running. We see that we already have the previous webhook from the Spanish version of this video, and we just created together this new webhook. They are storing this webhook settings configuration table, and what we got here is the information necessary to manage a single webhook. Let's follow the diagram here of the webhook configuration / creation and see what's going on. So when we created the new table here, what we submitted was the following: the SharePoint site, the GUID, and the expiration timestamp. These are precisely the mandatory information that is needed here. The resource, notification URL, well, this is the same flow, we'll see that in an expiration date time. So the list ID and the SharePoint site are mandatory fields that we need to provide when creating a webhook. So you see these webhook lifecycle columns over here. What we're managing is first the creation of the webhook. So we've got a status to log if the creation was a failure, or we are listening now, or we are near expiration date, which is managed with this timestamp column. Now, after the webhook is configured, we're going to be logging in the last callback if it was a success or failure. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's first check how a webhook is created. This is a solution where everything is being built in, and you see that really we have only 4 flows to manage the whole thing. We have flow to create a webhook. Now they want to the broker. This is the main flow that is going to manage all the incoming calls from SharePoint, the requests, and then these two manage the renewal of the flow. Check if we are near expiration date, and then renew the flow, just managing the handshake so SharePoint says, okay, I'll be sending you a new request even though it should have been expired. Let's take a look at the creation. I'm going to open the creation flow and also the broker because they are intertwined by this handshake. So let's jump back here. Creation flow is going to handle these calls over here, the ones in green. So we're going to say, hey SharePoint, tell me, so I'm subscribing to this list over here. And SharePoint is going to tell, okay, I'm going to send to your webhook service, so the broker in our case, at this random string to verify that. And if you answer within 5 seconds, it will tell to the other flow, hey, it's okay. And then the webhook is created. So create webhook 19 minutes ago already. Creating YouTube videos is not the fastest task. Okay, so when a row is added, so when we created this record, SharePoint webhook setting, submitting all these details, this flow was triggered and the HTTP action to SharePoint was submitted with the following information. So for this list with the GUID and the subscriptions endpoint telling SharePoint, hey, this is the list I want to hear from. Now you see that we had these two these two flows. Let's jump one. The oldest is going to be the creation flow, and the other one is the one that was listening the file that we uploaded. This is the one that was triggered during the handshake. So here, when SharePoint tested the webhook to verify that what we are telling him that we are listening to this flow is true. So you see that this flow has 2 branches. This one is for the creation and this one is for the listening to changes. So this is creation and this is listen to changes. And basically what we're doing is getting the validation token, this random string that is generated by SharePoint in here. So this random string is added into the query string in the URL, and what we need to do is tell SharePoint, hey, in text plain, I'm just returning the random string that you just submitted to me to verify that I'm who I'm saying I am. And this is basically it. So here we are responding, HTTP response, action, content type text plain, and this is the same value that we got from here, the same value over here. Now this is the next execution of the flow, which is already when we uploaded the new file into the library. And then this is following this other branch. So when it's not creation time, but now we are listening to changes. So first what we do is respond to the SharePoint webhook telling, yeah, we have listened to the changes and now we are going to process it, but we don't want to wait for all the processing before telling SharePoint that we're okay. And what we do is, first of all, get the webhook setting. The webhook setting is this record, because here we are holding information, and we could be holding more information, such as, for example, this is a project table, a project library for XYZ project. All right, and how are we getting this ID over here? This is the ID of the record, and this is actually coming in the response from SharePoint. So when SharePoint is notifying us of a change, this is what SharePoint is telling us. This array, it's always one, but it's an array in case you were having multiple I think listeners for the same webhook. What we are storing here is like a subscription ID. This is to identify the webhook expiration. This is the expiration of the webhook to tell us, hey, remember that at this time, 28th of December, this is going to be expired, and we're no longer going to notify you. And then other information resource, this is the library, the site URL, the tenant ID, web ID, I think that, I don't know what that is. And then the client state is precisely the GUID. This is the GUID of the Dataverse table where we're holding the information. And this was configured when we created the flow here, webhook registration. In the parameters, in here, the body, well, you're not seeing it, but here, to do notification URL, expiration date time, client state. Here we are telling SharePoint, hey, this is the GUID from the trigger table, so that we are notified, and then everything matches. Now, following with what's going on, then we have to set up a change query. What is this about the change query? If you notice here, when the compose is basically getting the body from the trigger. So we open this show raw outputs. This is what SharePoint is telling us. This is not telling us anything about what actually was the change like. So what we need to do is ask SharePoint, okay, I got your message that something has changed. What exactly has changed? And this is the reason why we need to create what's called a change query. And for that, well, we are preparing the object here. You see that it's well, it's better to see it in here. JSON object here, where we are telling what types of changes we want to listen to. For more info, we've got the change query documentation here. Oops. Where you can here get the list of all the different properties that a change query has to listen to different things, like it was a file that was moved, or it was a renaming, or a restoring of a version. So there are different changes that you can look at, and normally what we want is, in this case, for example, addition of files or updating of properties. And then what we have to do is execute this change query. So tell SharePoint, hey, from the change that you told me, tell me about the files that were added, for example, we see here. And then what we are doing here is, with these three actions, what we are doing is logging the changes that happened into the webhook operation logs table. And why all these three actions? This is a batch operation. Imagine that we have 1,000 records that were uploaded at a time. We don't want to do a for and do a create, a Dataverse action create for each of the files that were uploaded. Why? Because we're going to hit the web API limits of Dataverse. We're going to consume a lot of resources. That's going to affect the licensing limits that we've got for our account, and there are other considerations. And here what we are doing is create multiple batch operation. If you want to know more about that, let me know in the comments. And then just here we log the change token, and the execution was correct. This is what we are seeing here. We are logging if this was a success or a failure, and then we are logging this change token. This is massive. Change token here, and I don't know exactly what it's standing for, but somewhere in here it's got a timestamp to tell SharePoint, well, and we persist this change token to tell SharePoint, hey, next time we get a webhook from here, remember that we're not getting much information in here. We're not getting from SharePoint when was that the change happened and what was the change about. So what we are storing is this change token that SharePoint gives us when we perform this change query over here. And this is, if we open that, it is the information. And here in the change token with this string value, this is telling us, okay, this change that you got notified from happened here. And this is the, if you use this token for the next query, and this is why we have this conditional over here, if the change token is empty or not. If it's not empty, so this branch over here, we are going to send to the next change query this token telling SharePoint, hey, tell me a change since that change token happened. So let's test that out live. So I'm going to upload a new file, okay? And now I'm going to wait for the webhook broker to execute. Let me pause video. Okay. So let's take a look what happened now. So if you jump here now, we have a change token. This is the change token from the previous code, and thanks to that, we are only getting information from the new file, which is item ID 2, which is exactly this new file that has been registered. And we go to webhook operations. This is it. This is the one. And the important thing is that this change token now is the newest one. So now the new file caused SharePoint to have a new change token, and this is what we are storing, so that the next time we are called by the webhook, and then we are going to submit this change token in the change query, so that we only get the newest changes since that happened. Now, if we didn't put this change token, we are going to get all the changes in the library since the beginning of time, so since it was created. And this is important because if you forget this value, you're always going to get duplicate messages, because you're going to have a row here, it's an array, a row here for each of the files that are in the changes. Not only file changes, if you rename a file, change a property, all those changes are registered into the SharePoint library objects, and SharePoint is going to notify to you unless you tell SharePoint, hey, only give me since this last change token happened. Well, and that's that. Hit the subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, then we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching till the end, and take care.